Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing you insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide you with an actionable perspective on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Ruby Powers, and I'm your companion through this ever-evolving landscape of legal practice. And on each episode, we're going to hear about our guest superpowers and their perspectives on reaching success, and just learn about their journey and see what we can take from that to help along on our journey as well. So, no need to reinvent the wheel, but we can find a way to improve upon it for ourselves and personalize it. So, Greg Siskind, thank you so much for being here. So I don't remember when we actually met, but I do remember we were on a panel like a long time ago. It might have been like a long time ago. It might have been like, I don't know, 12 or something years ago. And it was about marketing. And something in the panel you said, well, you could always just write the book on it. And that just on the topic and, become a thought leader and expert. And that always resonated with me because then about a decade or so later, some years later, I wrote a book on law practice management.
A very good book.
So I want to say thank you again for planting that seed. But I mean, your bio is very impressive, and it's really funny because we could talk about you as an immigration attorney. We could talk about you as a thought leader in AI, in marketing, as an author. So I don't know which way you want me to. How do you shorten your bio? But and then you created VisaLaw.com back in 1994. So you're a visionary. You've always been thinking about the future, which I really love talking with you. And you're constantly learning. So I'll let you mention anything else more you want to highlight about your bio, because I think you're very impressive. So,
well, I've been it's always been sort of a tension between sort of going along the path that was the sort of the conventional path, or the ones that initially where my parents were pushing me along the way, or my peers were, versus things that where I eventually would realize that I wanted something different, and then I had to make decisions on how to pivot. So it's been over the years kind of those pivots that have been and taking advantage of the opportunities of the moment to really be able to take advantage of. Early on in my career, I went to a fancy law school, and then I was like most of my classmates, everybody was tracking into big law or big judicial clerkships, and I did that at the beginning, thoroughly not enjoying that. I was like thinking, like, how do I get out of law? How do I do something completely different? I made a big mistake. And then when I figured out was that, I gave it some time and found something I really liked, which was immigration by accident at the large firm I was at. And then I had to figure out how to pivot to being able to do that as my career, which is the one area of law I really loved. And not that others aren't good, but it was the one I knew was for me, at a firm that made it very clear to me that they didn't want that to be a practice area for them, and they wanted me to stick to the business the business law that I was doing. So that was, you mentioned the VisaLaw.com, and sort of like being in the right place at the right time and taking advantage of what's out there. And at the time, I saw the internet changing the way lawyers would practice, and I didn't consider myself sort of a techie growing up. I didn't have a computer until I was an adult. I didn't take programming or anything like that. Like in high school, I was just starting when I was in school. But I really kind of like embraced it more as a tool from a marketing perspective of what it could do to build that practice, and then eventually started to really appreciate it in a lot of other ways. But that was a big pivot. One was trying to figure out, okay, I'm an immigration lawyer in this small city that doesn't have a lot of immigration work. The internet might be helpful for that, but how do I actually hone in and make a decent living? I'm not in Silicon Valley. I can't get all these tech clients. I'm not in New York where, there's just a huge number of immigrants there. And that was one, again, where I kind of looked around for opportunity and realized I was in Nashville, which everybody's going to assume it was music immigration. It wasn't music, actually, healthcare. Not most, but a lot of the largest hospital systems in the country are headquartered in Nashville. And that was an area that I could network and build a practice for physician immigration there, and took advantage of that. Later on over the years, there were sort of similar things to that. In the mid, I guess 2015, I got really interested in what was happening in the AI space, and decided that we could start to build. Over the years, as you mentioned it already, a big theme for me has been writing, and I've written, I don't know, seven or eight books plus multiple editions of most of those books. I had so that was the one thing I liked, was things that involved writing. And what I realized was that in software, it's not that different than writing. And what I wanted to do of expert systems, which were basically books written into software that, or articles written in software that would help people evaluate how the law applies to them, or a lawyer figure out how the law applies to a situation, and basically use AI to help to guide you to the answer, or to a document, help you build a document, or that. So we started building. Then we took advantage of these tools that were coming in AI at that time, because the big revolution in 2015, 2016 were the development of no-code AI, where you didn't have to have a team of programmers to be able to develop web applications to help build out these eligibility advisors or these drafting tools. And that's where I got started in the software space, and that has obviously changed in the last year and a half with OpenAI, and the rapid development of generative AI. And that is our company's again pivoted in a big way into that space, and that's where I'm spending most of my energy now.
So before we go a little bit more into that, it seems like there's an analogy here, like right before the internet became really big, you saw the tea leaves, you saw the future, and you had the website, and you wanted to pivot, and then now you've been paying attention to AI for a while, and you're not just you're like really being innovative in this space. But just before we go into more in AI, like what made you decide to be an author? Because like that's not like that takes a lot of energy and time, and you like a lot of law practice management people that trying to run their law firm, and you're like a partner of a big law firm.
Yeah. So I started writing well before I was a partner at a big law firm. Actually, when I was in law school, it started basically with an article. I had in law school, I was doing an independent study and it was, I didn't realize it was on an immigration topic, even though it was about the integration of the European legal profession. And I wrote this big paper for these 3 credit hours with a professor who was really influential on me. And she said, this is really good. You should consider getting this published. But I was finishing law school this was my last semester of law school. So she said, just send it to journals and you'll see. So I ended up sending this article to the ABA's section on international law, and they have a journal called the International Lawyer. And they published it, and it was the first thing I ever had published, and I was super excited about that. But what was kind of nice was that I didn't tell anybody at the big law firm I was working at that I had written this thing, and then it got published. And then a partner actually saw this thing land on his desk and was just reading the table of contents on there, and saw the first year associate had this article in the journal he gets, and he was super encouraging and said, you really should try and figure out more opportunities for writing. Well, anyway, as it turns out, I said I was in the corporate section of my firm, but I was also being shared with the environmental law section. And I got assigned to this project where I was with another lawyer, and we were supposed to do this 50-state survey of medical waste law, which is super not interesting. And but it was a hot time for that subject because you're too young. But there were all these beach needles washing up on beaches and all this, and there was like the AIDS epidemic, and there was all this fear about medical waste, and so all these new laws were passing all over the country, and there was nothing written on it. So the other lawyer who I was working on this with, who was just a year ahead of me, was very entrepreneurial. Learned a lot from this guy, and he just reached out to Thomson Reuters, or the company that preceded them, I guess, and said, do you want a book on medical waste law? We have already done all the research we hadn't done all the research, but we were well into it. And that book was a big hit. I got a lot of money in royalties, and it was enough to finance my starting a law practice in immigration, which is really what I wanted to do. But I just sort of learned the power of a book from that first environmental law book. And then the next thing I did was after the firm opened, and I set up this website, which was also, at the time, there was very little written about it, and not a lot of lawyers were curious about it. I learned from the lawyer in the first case, where I just reached out to the ABA blindly and said, "Hey, you guys want a book on internet marketing? I'm an expert on that subject now. Not really, just basically having done it, but I."
Yeah.
They took a chance on me at ABA, and I'm grateful for that. And I wrote that book, and it was a big seller for the ABA, and I got a lot of speaking opportunities, and it really led to that. And then finally, the next thing I did was a book for Lexis on physician immigration, and that was the first one substantively actually about immigration law, which is what I was trying to build. But each book served a purpose. The first one was sort of escape from my law firm and help finance that. The second one was to give me some notoriety, hopefully, in the bar as a legal tech expert, which would serve me well over the years. And then the last of those initial ones, I think it was 97, this book came out with Lexis that was designed to help me. I didn't have any doctors as clients in 1997. I wanted to. I thought that would be a great area to get into. So I had that book help me, to basically establish my name in that area. So that's that.
So it seems like it's not just about being at the right place at the right time, but it's like taking hold of that opportunity, having the gumption, because like some people would be like, what does this have to do with what, I'm going to stay in my lane, and like you call it as an opportunity. And so that's.
I mean, I sort of like was, it was like just trying to figure out like, where do I want my practice to grow? How strategically would a book help me get there? Is the way I looked at it, as opposed to just sort of writing something because it's interesting, but it doesn't actually have any, you can't really figure out where it's going to take you that you're not already getting.
Yeah. And depending on the book and the volume and your audience, like authors don't usually make a lot of money off of the book. I mean, it depends. You could, but there's like the sort of like the becoming a thought leader, ancillary services, and just other opportunities that come from that. So
it's hard to make a lot of money on a book that's aimed at lawyers. There's a lot of competition in the space, and you can't. You can, in theory, make an okay amount of money, especially if you negotiate well and you have and maybe publish yourself or publish it. There are things you can do to try and increase. I think most of the time, people that are writing books have to, kind of weigh whether there are non-financial benefits or indirect financial benefits, I should say, to that. And, that's that's the trade-off on there. But and a lot's changed in the publishing industry, as you know, in the last, so the economics have really changed where, when I was starting out, you didn't really have a choice. You had to find a publisher.
Right.
There were self-published books, but they were horrible. and they had a well, first of all, they had a bad reputation as far as the quality goes of the writers. And then the quality of the print and everything was terrible. Obviously, with ebooks and audiobooks and print on demand and a lot of things that have changed over the years, you can do a lot yourself. And in fact, after doing books with 4 different publishers, I've started, and I chaired the ABA practice management program on a volunteer basis for when I was with the ABA. That was but it taught me a lot about publishing, and then that's how I ended up setting up my own publishing operation. The last 4 books, well, my last 4 books until the Ayla cookbook were all with Allen House, which is the publishing house we created.
Awesome. So you have a lot of experience. I'm currently on the book publishing committee with ABA Law Practice Division, and I've published with Ayla before. So yeah, there's a lot you learned from having multiple books. So you're great researchers. So let's move to AI. You're every time I get some time to talk with you, you're just telling me some new and awesome, crazy project that you're working on, and or different stages of the project. So this will be coming out soon, and I know your programs, well, I don't want to steal the show for you. So like, what are you up to right now?
So we are putting the final touches in beta on 2 products, one aimed at immigration lawyers and one aimed at the rest of the bar. The one aimed at immigration lawyers is through our VisaLaw.Ai brand, and that is the actual immigration law product is called GEN, GEN, and it has a combination of different kinds of. It's a suite of AI tools for immigration lawyers, and you don't have to be an immigration lawyer for most of it, but there's a legal research product component to it. So you may have heard about other companies out there in this space, like Casetext has a product called CoCounsel, and there's Fastcase has a legal research product, and West and Lexis all have it. We've developed one that's focused on immigration law, and we have been collaborating with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and the product that's in beta right now is one that has not all, but a very sizable portion of the Ayla books. I don't know if yours is in there, but if it's not, I should talk about that. But so there's like 15 Ayla immigration law books from Ayla, and then all the Allen House books that my publishing house has will be in there, and then all the primary law, basically, and we're tons of stuff that we found in different places, some from nonprofits, some from government websites. But there's the idea is that it's an answer bot, so you ask the questions that come up every day in your practice. You ask it the same way, like we're all on listservs and Facebook groups, and in the usual places, or knocking on the doors of the lawyers down the hall from us. But the idea is that you ask the questions, and it has a large library, probably 100,000 pages of materials, and it provides an answer, and it also, more importantly, provides citations. So if the answers are usually pretty good, but even if they're not, you can get the citations are a blurb that quotes from the source material, as well as a link back to that material, so you can look for yourself to see what was said. And importantly, with these tools, it's only coming up with answers to these immigration law questions from the materials themselves. So it's not combing the internet looking, for stuff. And so the 3 ways basically that we get the product to give you the best answers, because there have been some notorious examples of bad, of gotten in trouble. Even this is not coming out today, but in the last, over the Christmas season, there was this headline story in the New York Times about Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's lawyer, getting into trouble because he did legal research with his law. I think he's been disbarred, but they were submitting false case citations and some legal briefs that they had gotten on ChatGPT. That's happened several times already. But what we do to prevent that is, one, the questions themselves are only searching for, or only compiling answers based on the research materials themselves. It's not going to places that you don't know where the answers are coming from. Two is we use a setting called temperature. Temperature in generative AI is basic. All generative AI is doing is guessing the next word. It's really good at guessing the next word that it thinks based on your question, because the language models have been built on millions and millions and millions of documents on there. So it's pretty good at figuring out and interpreting what you're asking, guessing how to answer based on all that training that it's had. And so we set the temperature to 0, which is the most conservative level that you can have. And that means the words have to be closer together. OpenAI and ChatGPT uses a 7, and this is on a scale of 0 to 10. So it's designed to be more creative and give you those really cool answers and really interesting answers that it's become really well liked for. If they gave you really boring answers every time, probably people wouldn't be using it nearly as much for a lot of the personal stuff that people are using it for. But that's the default setting in there. So we have affected the answers to be a lot more sticking to the actual, not venturing too far from what was asked by setting the temperature really low. So it means that when it's looking for answers to questions, it's only looking at documents where words were really close together, so that it's more likely that the subject that you're asking about is being covered, and the material that's being cited is much more likely to close in. And the third thing I mentioned were citations. So I tell people a lot, it's like, you can't escape being the lawyer. You cannot outsource to generative AI your role as the lawyer. You still ultimately are responsible for checking. And it's the same way if you assigned a research task to a paralegal or a law clerk or somebody else. It's ultimately your responsibility to do some diligence on there. So if you get a legal research memo from a junior law clerk, you want them to give you, first of all, give you the citations, but actually copy the cases and attach them to the memo that they're giving you, so that you can kind of flip through and see if they were completely off base or not. But it's the same idea with generative AI, which is that you need to be doing the double checking on there, and we've made that a lot easier for people. So that's legal research. The tool also has something that we call document Q&A, where you can upload any of your own stuff and be able to do all kinds of things for it. So if you want to upload a request for evidence that you got in a case and have it analyze the issues in there and make suggested arguments, it can do that. If you did a Freedom of Information Act request and you want to get back and ask questions about what you're seeing in there, you can do that. You can upload your own research and ask questions on that. But so that's something that for a lot of firms. Oh, and also you can upload documents and that you think are good templates for, and instead of having to go through complicated and assembly software to try to turn things into templates, you can just say here's a document. This is the template I want to use. Here's the facts on my particular case. Can you put together a document that is following along this, the format for this in this template, changing it up to be, for these particular facts, and it can do that. So that's document Q&A. It also has something called private GPT, which is another issue with OpenAI, is that you can't use it ethically as a lawyer in a lot of cases with putting client information in. If you put you're training the language model, and also there are human beings that periodically do quality control checks with OpenAI, and it's a problem as far as a lawyer using it in any way that might expose client information. We have a solution on that, which allows you to use ChatGPT and have this, the great the temperature settings, and have and do all the controls of it, but combing the entire internet for the answers, as opposed to our immigration library, but none of the information is shared back with OpenAI. And then the last thing we do is we have a summary and translation tool where you can upload a document. Maybe you have, if you have doing some demos where I'll upload like a new regulation that comes out, your pages, and you can have it create a summary for you that's 1 page, 10 pages, whatever kind of setting you decide you want as far as how compressed you want the summary to be, and do it in nice bullet points and make it your life a lot easier by not having to necessarily read through a huge document. You can also take a foreign language document and have it summarized in English, or just give you a straight translation into the language that from the original language to English. So it has that capability as well. And that's what Jen's doing. And then we have a new product that's sandbox.legal is the twin, which is basically most of the same features, but it doesn't have the immigration library. And we are working on getting other kinds of materials in there, but it's more like these other resources for lawyers without the immigration part on there, because most of it is perfectly useful for any lawyer. It's the immigration law library that makes it, Jen, special for immigration lawyers, but take out the immigration law library and it's still a very useful product for lawyers. And that's what we're working on for the general legal market at a lower price point.
Oh, awesome. Well, so basically what you're going to be providing shortly is going to be a product that takes away a lot of that, the fear that a lot of attorneys have from all those people, like you're mentioning Michael Cohen and others who've gotten in the headlines for
Right.
relying too much on a source or something like that. And I mean, listening to like this last year of ChatGPT or AI conferences and presentations and everything, it seems like a lot of lawyers are in this like the ostrich with their head in the sand type of like, there's too much and their fear and and they just want to like ignore it or something. But I mean, I think this is where we both think this is where things are going. Obviously, you are dedicating so much of your time on this new program, these services. But I mean, what's your take on AI in the practice of law? Like, where do you see us going?
Well, I think most lawyers are going to be using it. Most people sort of dip their toes in the waters a little bit just to see what it is and haven't really used it much in their practice. I think part of the problem is they don't really know how to use it in their practice in a very practical way. Or they've been fearful because they've heard the horror stories about people who've gotten in trouble with it. So I think there'll be what I think in the beginning with ChatGPT is sort of like these big giant tools that have come out that are really good. But I think what we're going to start seeing in 2024 is the emergence of a lot of specialized tools that make it easier for you to use the generative AI in sort of small ways every day that you might not be thinking of. So that might be drafting tools that are designed for specific practice areas. So, if you have a particular kind of petition you're always working on, there might be a company out there that says, hey, use our AI tool and we can dramatically speed up how much time it takes to prepare that kind of petition. And then you just basically answer the questions and see a first draft of a particular document. And so the tools themselves, I think there'll be a lot of lawyers are not probably going to sort of be the tinkerers and try and come up with all these things. They're going to look for tools that are out there that are already pre-designed to solve a particular problem for them. Like one thing that's an easy generative AI case that a lot of lawyers are using, don't even think of it as generative AI, is if you're in a Zoom call where you have Zoom for years has had transcription, and it's and that's great, where you basically can get a transcript of the whole meeting, and that's fine, and that is a kind of AI, but that's not the kind I'm talking about. But what they do that's cool now is that I use a product called Read.ai, which plugs into Zoom, and at the end of the meeting, I get a bullet point summary of what was discussed in the meeting. It's able to figure out these insights to figure out who promised to do what in the meeting and what the follow-ups are supposed to be. And it gives you kind of like, all these these bonuses to make it, hopefully a lot easier to do, to take that meaningful off. The other thing I like is that with the summary is, in a lot of cases, I am delegating off to somebody in our firm that's going to work on this, and I can give them the link to this, and they can watch the recording of it if they want. They can read the transcript if they want, but they may just be happy just to see the bullet points on there and be able to jump into it a lot more quickly. That's generative AI. A lot of lawyers are using those tools now. Zoom has it built in, and people, once it sort of becomes really kind of commonplace in your practice, you stop thinking of it as AI and you just think of it as a product feature that it's doing. And I think that's what's going to start to happen, where there's just a lot of things we're going to be doing every day that we're not thinking of it. We don't think of spell check and grammar, Grammarly as AI that's being applied to your documents. It's just basically, just another tool. And I think that's I think where we're going, is where a lot of people are going to be starting to use these tools and not even realize that they're using them. And the ones that are sort of consciously going out and buying products, like the one that I was describing that we built on there, the goal is to make eventually we'll have 1 million pre-scripted prompts and all kinds of ways that people don't have to think too hard to figure out what to do with this thing that they have on their desktop. That's, for us, we're making the assumption that unless we sort of make it really easy for people to figure out what to do with the tool, they're not going to figure it out on their own. Well, some might, but a lot of people won't, and they need help to figure out conceptually what they should be doing with it. For a lot of people, it's just sort of like seeing short videos showing you can do this, you can do this, you can do that, and that's the other way we're planning on approaching things, with probably having a lot of live streams and probably having a lot of videos to show people what you can do with the tools.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I heard this quote a couple of years ago about, like, and just sort of just like what, and sort of long idea of that we don't really think of it as AI or special after a while, once it starts getting encompassed in our software and in our programming, what we use. But no, I agree. And I think that, I mean, my prediction is that a lot of the firms need to be looking at this and figuring out how to apply it, and not be cutting costs on like labor, and being more efficient and having ways to sort of have more quality control. But thinker that. So who inspires you, and who do you sort of take for inspiration from?
Well, Ruby Powers for one, but no, I'd love to go from your talks, and you do a lot of creative things that I think people
Thank
to. But they're it sounds corny, but I mean, my father was a huge inspiration to me. He passed away at 67, and he was still kind of in the prime of his career. He was a marketing genius, as far as I'm concerned. He had an advertising agency, but he just loved marketing. And he's the one that made it for me. I think a lot of the interest that I've had over the years in law firm marketing, I got from him, but also on trying things that, I mean, he just loved it. When I was working on the website 30 years ago, and the website turns 30 in June.
Oh, wow.
It was just a lot of support. So if you have somebody, it's really nice if you have somebody that's close to you that is giving you a lot of that seems to be as excited about what you're working on as you are. So that helps. I mean, there's been tons of great people over the years, and a lot of people that my law partner Lynn Susser and some of my colleagues as well have also, I'd put in that category. So I don't know if there's one I would list except my dad. And my dad is actually Alan, who is the Allen House, Alan and Allen House. So that was my he was a big reader, and I knew that when after he passed away, that was a good way to remember him.
Oh, I remember you shared that with me. That's very memorable. And I was actually thinking about my mom, because she brought she brought the love of learning and reading to me. But when I was talking to you not too long ago, I found out, like, how many books do you read a year? Because I thought I read a lot, but I think
I always tally up the log. It's actually a little bit less this year than I usually aim for. My resolution is always to read 50 books in a year. But this year was around 40. I is a, I mean, I just basically use every opportunity, whether it's on at the gym, on a Kindle, or on a bike, listening to an audio book, or on airplanes, wherever. But that is one thing for me. And I try to tell people, don't just read business books on there. Don't just read things that are like good for you. I like, you need a break, and that's part of work-life balance, is finding being able to turn off your everything and basically getting engrossed in something, science fiction, or whatever your thing is on there. But that's so for me, that's part of sanity.
well, and so we like to ask everybody on the show, what do you think your superpower is, and how did you get it?
I think my superpower is probably being able to take complicated things and explain it to people who don't really want to hear it, as far as like the complicated, whether it's like taking really complicated immigration concepts and being able to explain it to a client, or taking, complicated technology concepts and being able to explain it to lay lawyers on there. I think I'm better at that than a lot of other people who can't really, I think, really kind of make their marks suitable for the audience that they're in front of. And it's really important a lot of times, I think, in terms of people really wanting to listen to what you have to say on there. I think it's sort of a matter of respect, where you kind of meet the audience where they are, rather than kind of like expecting them to get to where you want them to be on there. That's a superpower, but that's something that I think I'm probably decent at.
Yeah, that's a really important skill, because that's, I mean, I've heard that people say that before, and I think you're right. And I think those, like, even professors and teachers who aren't able to teach because they can't distill it down to somebody who's learning it for the first time, then they're not really doing their job. And part of our jobs, as lawyers and in marketing, is to be able to convey that important information. So what we've talked about AI, we've talked about being innovative, marketing, and the importance of reading and balance. And we talked a bit about that. But do you have any other closing thoughts or reflections on those, predominantly our audience are those who are running a law firm, starting, or like a partner manager, and are just trying to improve their practice?
Nothing like a really narrow question like that. As
Any parting thoughts before you want to say, make it?
I guess that well, first of all, I don't think I'm necessarily the best manager on there. That's the one thing, is like, if you are not great at something, then find somebody who is good. That's sort of like probably the best advice. One of the things that I realized was, like, I'm not the greatest when it comes to HR management. I'm not the greatest when it comes to the financial side of business. I'm good at a lot of other things, but I've, over the years, have sort of like quickly realized realize what your weaknesses are. If you can correct them, great. If you can't, then find somebody else who can basically do that, rather than just doing a bad job at it. If you're not great, I mean, if you don't have a choice, you obviously have to deal with managing people. But if you are self-aware enough to recognize your weaknesses, then get out of the way and correct it and let other people basically do that. I see that a lot of times, where people just are in the wrong positions because they either their ego wants them to be in that position, or they don't have a choice because they don't have anybody else that they can get to in it. But if you're in a position where you can recognize your weakness and then find somebody who can actually meet that need, that would be something really good.
I think that was really sage advice. Where can our listeners find you if they want to connect with you or see what you're up to?
Sure. So you can always find me on LinkedIn at G Siskind, or on Twitter. I think it's the same. You can find me on my website at VisaLaw.com for the law firm side and VisaLaw.AI for the software company. And that should nail it and get you where you want.
Yeah, you're very findable on the internet, Greg Siskind, in a good way. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm always inspired. Love our conversations and check-ins when we're at conferences and in between. And I just want to thank listeners for joining us for this insightful journey. I know I learned a few new things that I didn't know before and get re-inspired. So your time and engagement means a lot. And if you've enjoyed this episode and want to continue the conversation, we're inviting listeners to join the Power Up Your Practice Facebook group and keep powering up and stay connected. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. Join us next week for another episode where we'll continue to explore insightful strategies for success. Power Up Your Practice with us. See you next time.